Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Let's get right into this week's report for October 28 through November 3 of 2025. This week the moon's waxing through the rest of Capricorn. It's going to wax all through Aquarius, making a conjunction to Pluto. Moon will be waxing all through Pisces, making a conjunction to the North Node of Destiny, Saturn, and Neptune. And then by next Sunday, the moon will ingress Aries. The moon will reach its first quarter phase in Aquarius, squaring the sun in Scorpio, the crisis and action phase coming up. Be talking about that. And we do have several aspects going on, some changes that will be happening, including Mercury reaching the last critical degree of Scorpio, 29, making a trine aspect to Neptune at 29 Pisces, and then changing signs. Mercury will ingress Sagittarius. This will change the rulership for Mercury from Mars in Scorpio to Jupiter in Cancer. So I'll be talking about the meaning of that and how I see that. Mercury is in its retrograde shadow already, so it will be returning to Scorpio in November. But it's going to be changing how the general perception and communication style is in the world. Also, as Mercury comes into Sagittarius, it opposes Uranus at 0 degrees of Gemini. So a lot going on for Mercury. Mars is also within this grand trine to Jupiter and Saturn. That's very helpful for the world as far as Mars goes and action. I'll talk more about that, but Mars will be making the perfect trine to Saturn on Wednesday, October 29. So that's a beneficial aspect for everybody. And let's see here, we have Mercury is also going to be sextile Pluto as it comes into Sagittarius. But again, this is all going to be territory that we're going to be reviewing and dealing with for an extended period of time for the rest of October, all through November and into December, before Mercury will move forward away from this section of the zodiac. So pay attention to things that are happening this week, because it could have a connection to things that we'll be dealing with for an extended period of time. Now, as far as other aspects, it looks like we have Venus making an opposition to Chiron and entering the square with Jupiter. So Venus will be wrapped up in this dynamic of Jupiter square Chiron. Now, Jupiter is slowing down. Right now, it's reaching the end of 24 degrees. It's going to come into 25 degrees, the degree it will retrograde by November 11. And it is in a pretty tight trine with Saturn. Now, technically, they're not going to make the exact trine, so it's never going to show up on my aspect list through November, but it's going to be really tight, and it's still a major influence of these two helping each other out and cooperating with each other. So I'll be talking about that the next few weeks in my future reports. But they'll make their perfect trine next year of 2026 in the fire signs of Leo and Aries. But they're still within orb. I mean, it's a strong trine. I mean, if you had this in your birth chart, you would definitely say you have a trine between Jupiter and Saturn. And again, it's a grand trine currently with Mars, and Mercury just went through there. So I think there has been a little bit of a turning point. Mercury's still in some tricky dynamics here, because Mercury is ruling this south node placement of Virgo, where there's been a lot of changes for people this year about work and also health matters. So issues about work and service and health are going to go through maybe a little bit of a dynamic shift as we come into this week. But it could also be connected to things that's going to be in play for an extended period of time with whatever this change is because of the Mercury retrograde. All right, and those are the main aspects. I'll be talking about the Venus T-square going on with Chiron and Jupiter at the end of the week into next week. And then we also have Venus making an inconjunction to Saturn by next Monday. And then next Monday, Mars reaches the last critical degree of Scorpio with a trine aspect to Neptune before it changes signs, ingressing Sagittarius by next week. So those are all the major aspects written out in the description for you with timestamps throughout the week each day. And just looking at the chart here, we have planets scattered all throughout the zodiac. We have a lot of different influences, but we still have a lot of water going on. Water is the main influence. water element, which deals with emotions and feelings and sensitivities and everything that's below the surface and behind the scenes. People really getting wrapped up in their emotions and their feelings of things here. But I think that as Mercury starts to change, we're going to get a little more fire, especially in the way we're thinking. And with that opposition that's going to be coming in with Uranus, it could be quite exciting. There could be some disruptions with Mercury, and Mercury is still right next to Mars. Again, this is going to be an extended influence that we've already been dealing with. It is going to change the style, the flavor, how people start to communicate, but there's still a lot of mechanical things here, technology things, communication issues, traveling issues, and there could still be some interruptions or something different with this opposition to Uranus this week. So I'll tell you my opinions on that and what I think it could be as I go through the chart. But it could also be exciting, looking at things in a different way, different perspective, and seeing things in a different way, I think is going to be a strong influence. But we're going to have to still process that for a while, because again, we're going to be going back and forth between Sagittarius and Scorpio with this Mercury. And we don't have a lot of Earth, so the moon has been in Capricorn the last couple days. I think it is helpful to help bring a little more of this grounded energy, but it's still outweighed by all this water going on. And we don't have a lot of air. Venus is in air in its home sign. That is also helpful. We do have Pluto and Uranus still in air, but I don't really look at that as personal like Venus over here. So as the moon is going through air, that's also going to help people be more intellectual and objective, and kind of the need to detach from some of this emotional sensitivity, but it's still going to be very strong in the background no matter what. And we don't have a lot of fire at all, so as Mercury comes into Sag, that's going to increase the fire a little bit, which is the element of action and instinct and more outward. And then when the moon is in Aries, that will also bring more fire. But overall, we still have a lot of different influences with all these planets, all around the chart. There's not like a focused energy here besides where the sun is. That's always where the general focus is, Scorpio, the deeper side of life, what's below the surface and hidden. But still, there's a lot of different flavors of things that could be pulling people in different directions somewhat here. We are waxing forward from this lunar cycle, so there's more and more light day by day, night by night on this moon, building towards the full moon. Won't be this week. Again, we're entering the first quarter moon this week. So that's what I'm seeing. Let me go through the chart day by day. Starting here on Tuesday, October 28, we start things off with the moon at 19 degrees of Capricorn, right as we come into Tuesday morning through the early morning hours. The moon is still in Capricorn, and it looks like there is going to be a lot of aspects. There's actually a lot of sextiles and some trines here for Tuesday, which are normally more flowing. Things are easier, more cooperative, generally speaking. But at the same time, the moon is building towards Pluto, right after the moon changes signs. So it looks like there's going to be a mood change. The day starts off with the moon in Capricorn, which is more practical and earthly. It's still more serious. The moon in Capricorn and in Aquarius is being ruled by Saturn. So a lot of stuff still comes to what's behind the scenes, where people feel pressure and responsibility and a little bit of stress around some things of life, depending on how this aligns with your personal chart. But in the general scheme of things, it's about Saturn, responsibilities, and this weight that's behind the scenes overall. But it's also about goals, ambitions, responsibilities about your future. What do you want to achieve, or what do you need to take care of? There's still this serious vibe about all that. And the first aspect is the moon making a square to Chiron and opposing Jupiter. So the moon is going through this Jupiter-Chiron square. That was exact last week, but it's still really tight. That's in the background. And again, that's adding a lot of sensitivity for people about how they feel about themselves, confidence issues, um, issues of freedom and independence versus the need for safety and security and comfort, being more cautious versus taking a risk in life. Or it could just highlight literal wounds and just issues of all kinds in different ways, depending on the person, or if this is even an influence for. It's not going to affect every single person, basically, but it's in the background for the world. And it's a long-term aspect that we're dealing with. And this Chiron in Aries is ruled by this Mars. So the fact that Mars is coming in and is already in this grand trine, I think we've turned the corner, technically. The strongest part of this aspect was last week, so I think we have turned the corner as Mercury and Mars have come into this grand trine, getting a little more support in some ways, but it's still something that's being triggered here for some people. And now with the moon going through there, again, it's going to trigger it again. And then later on with Venus will trigger it as well. So we have planets in all of the cardinal signs, the signs of initiation, the signs that talk about needing to start things and move forward with things. But then there's these different influences that could be making it challenging for some people to do what they need to do. So it requires this emotional maturity as we go through Tuesday. The circumstances are still a little bit off with relationships where Venus is. And the moon squaring Chiron in Aries, it's not a time where we necessarily have all the freedom that we want. Generally speaking, of course, it's not this way exactly for every single person, but this is the background. The moon in Capricorn deals with its responsibilities, its work, it's what needs to be done versus what we would rather be doing, our independence, our freedom. And then opposite Jupiter, as the day goes on for the first part of the morning, first thing in the morning for a lot of people, it's going to be around the afternoon hours for people in the East Coast, and then the evening hours for people in Europe, where the moon is reaching this T-square. You should be a little bit extra cautious because that's kind of the issue too, is this opposition between Capricorn and Cancer. This is the axis of safety and security. Your work safety and security, your material needs, the practical side of life versus your emotional safety, security, and comfort. So Capricorn and Cancer tend to be more cautious, and it's running into this square with Chiron in Aries. It's like, it's not the normal Aries with Chiron here. It's making people doubt themselves maybe a little bit, or again, that need to take a risk and be brave and courageous. It's like challenging people's courage a little bit. But at the same time, Chiron can be an issue of people getting injured and hurt. And so there is a need to be cautious. So it's only for a few hours as the moon goes through this, but just be aware, of this aspect and kind of take it easy a little bit. The moon will instantly come into a lot of support because, again, it's going to start reaching sextiles and trines with everything after it goes through this T-square. With the moon opposite Jupiter around this time, it could also just tend to amplify things, amplify the mood, the feelings of things. Things could be over the top a little bit. So also kind of be aware of that and try not to seek something to be fulfilled, by excess or just going over the top with things. Just kind of accept whatever the vibe is in this moment, because it will pass. And again, Mercury is reaching the last critical degree of Scorpio, a sense of urgency for something to be changing. And because Mercury rules Virgo, where the South Node is, that's been talking about purging, purifying, reorganizing, life in different ways, especially wherever you have Virgo in your birth chart. There's a sense of urgency for those things, for you to be dealing with some of those things. And again, it could deal with health matters, could deal with work. It could also talk about this general vibe in the world, or especially the United States, about the workforce, about government employees not having a paycheck. There's a sense of urgency for some sort of new information or something new that's trying to happen as we move through the rest of this week around news. And then also around news, Mercury's ruling Gemini, the news, the information, the media, where Uranus is really shaking things up. And so, again, there's a sense of urgency for communication and news and activity and a lot of mental stimulation from this point forward. At the same time, though, as Mercury is reaching this last degree of Scorpio, it's making a trine to Neptune. And that is this connection. We're still in water before this change happens. And so Mercury, Neptune in the water signs, it's super intuitive. It has this reading between the lines type of vibe about it. Whereas even though Mars is next to Mercury, there can still be a lot of directness about communication and kind of a stinging effect. It's going to really change when Mercury comes into fire to be even more direct, more kind of putting one's opinions out there very strongly. That's a lot more direct. And right now it's more like, again, reading between the lines, picking up on things intuitively. People's feelings about things are very strong. But it can also tap into one's imagination, one's creativity and possibilities and dreams and fantasies. For some people, it can also be tapped into the spiritual world, getting downloads of intuition and feelings. But there's also this Neptune at this critical degree of Pisces, the last degree of the zodiac, and there's a lot of negatives about this position that we're closing out from now until the end of January. And this deals with conspiracies, a lot more about conspiracy theories and creative imagination and people kind of distorting. There's a distortion to things. There's a distortion to reality. But in this particular aspect, Mercury is more kind of tapped into things. So it can go either way depending on the consciousness of the individual, but it can be a lot of communication, a lot of thinking about mysteries, things that are hidden, a little bit of, again, conspiracy theories and things like that. Neptune here at this last degree is also going to really amplify. It's going to correlate to these water weather events that I've been talking about for 2025, how there's a lot of critical water events, storms. It's Neptune, god of the sea. Storm energy is very amplified, very big. And of course, there's storms going on in different places in the world that could be significant. So this is also unspoken things. Again, what I was talking about with reading between the lines, what's unspoken and really picking up on it strongly. So again, it can go, it's generally a positive aspect. Mercury is still being ruled by Mars, and Mars is in a grand trine with Saturn and Jupiter. So it is helpful. Like Mars, we have this boost going on, this power boost that's available for us. Now it is more on an emotional inner level, but it can be used for practical matters as well, especially as the moon comes into this sextile with Mars from this point forward as the day goes on. Channeling this energy into something more practical, more serious work and goals. So the mood could be pretty decent as the day goes on for the second half of the day in the world. But again, there's still a lot of water, a lot of emotions and feelings going on here. And for other people with that Mercury trine Neptune, it can also be a little bit of an escapism too into your own world or things that interest you. In some cases, what's below the surface and behind the scenes. And then the moon is sextile Mars, sextile Saturn, and sextile Mercury as the rest of the day goes on from Capricorn. So again, it could be the second half of the day, could be a good day to be taking action, to get things done, to be more motivated, to be determined. And Mars will be perfectly trine Saturn the following day on Wednesday, but it's still close enough that I think Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with Mars trine Saturn and Jupiter, there's more discipline available for people. There's more like controlled power, controlling our action, controlling our anger, being more mature about things, and what drives us, what motivates us. It's less impulsive, I would say. That's really going to change as time goes on and Mars comes into Sagittarius. But for now, for the next few days, we have a really good alignment here to get things done, to be more practical and disciplined with our action overall. Now, of course, not every single person, this is just the background, and for some people, these transits don't align with their chart and it won't be as powerful for them. But knowing this, you can really tap into it and check yourself and how this, now, okay, there's exceptions. So say you have planets at the end of Aquarius. Well, then Mars and Mercury have been squaring your personal planets. That is more of an impulsive, angry, kind of agitated aspect for those people personally, or the opposition for people that have planets at the end of the degrees of Taurus. And then also Leo, especially Leo. If you have planets at 25 to 29 degrees of Leo, then this Mercury and Mars is going to be squaring you this week. And so for those folks, you have to be a little more cautious. It could still trigger you a little bit, but at the same time, up in the sky with Mars trine Saturn, I think it's going to still help kind of mellow it out and kind of hold people back a little bit from getting too crazy with their emotions or anger. Things are still building up to be quite intense because the moon is right next to Pluto, which only happens every, couple days every month. So there is going to be a little bit of this emotional intensity that's still there. Plus all this water is still about emotions and feelings and sensitivity. It's just, I think it's a little more controlled this next few days. And so, yeah, if you need to get things done, if you have some goals, if you want to try to make something happen, I think there's support for it. It's always good when we have a grand trine like this. It's also a kite with the moon going through here. It shows that these planets are helping each other out. Like Mercury and Mars, they have support from Jupiter. Jupiter has support from Saturn. Saturn has support from Jupiter and Mars. They're all helping each other out. Now, there is one thing about this, even though I would consider this a positive aspect with these trines, trines show that there's no block in energy. It's a flowing energy between these planets. Usually it can be a supportive aspect, again, of help. But at the same time, this would also indicate that there's nothing blocking negative action for people as well. If somebody has a negative intention, they could get away with it with this type of an aspect, especially when Saturn is involved, and Jupiter and Cancer, the security aspect of things. So it's kind of like, for example, like the 9/11 attack on the Trade Center. Saturn had aspects of support of trines, I believe, in sextiles, if I remember correctly, and it's like the government missed it. I know there's a conspiracy, and I'm all for that. I kind of believe that conspiracy as well, that the government knew about it or something. I don't want to get into that, but my point is that with Saturn trines and sextiles from Mars, people can, again, there's no block to the action for good or bad. Let me just leave it at that. So that's one caution, is that there could still be some things going on in the world in different ways that aren't necessarily positive. And government or security officials could miss it in some way, something like that. But overall, it's a positive aspect of getting things done. So channel it into positivity, positive goals, maturity, and things that need to get done for the next few days. All right, and then the sextile from the moon to Mercury. Let me just repeat this. The moon sextile Saturn and Mars. Again, it can be, some emotional maturity, being more grounded and practical despite all the emotions and sensitivity that's in the air. And then as the moon goes forward and makes that sextile to Mercury and Neptune. So the circumstances, the mood starts to tap into this dynamic that Mercury is in with Neptune. Now, the Mercury-Neptune won't be exact until the overnight hours into Wednesday early morning, but it's extremely strong here on Tuesday as well. And the moon connects to that right before it changes signs. So something is available here for people. Again, the moon, the circumstances, and the mind, the thoughts are tapped into Neptune. Dreams, fantasies, also illusions. But things that can inspire people, I think. Or again, this vibe that's beginning to happen of, okay, now people want to kind of retreat, come into their own world behind the scenes, kind of escape into their own stuff of what they're wanting to do, as the moon is at the end of Capricorn, the end of this more practical side before it changes signs, which it will do as the day goes on into the night. So it's going to be Tuesday night that the moon ingresses Aquarius. And instantly, as the moon comes into Aquarius, it's picking up on this trine to Uranus and the conjunction to Pluto. And there's still this minor grand trine as well. Neptune is on the Pisces side of it. It was perfect when it was in Aries, but it's still there. And so it is intense. It is Pluto where the moon is. The circumstances are right with Pluto, power, control, but in Aquarius, it becomes more intellectual. There's a need to kind of deal with emotions and feelings through a more intellectual, objective perspective, which includes needing to detach. It is a little more challenging to detach when we have all this water, including Scorpio and the moon right next to Pluto. But circumstances come into this intellectual air sign, which again is about communications, about the mind. It's about the group and the friends and the community. There's this emotional need for freedom and independence. The moon is still being ruled by Saturn. It just kind of changes the mood and the dynamics about what's behind the scenes that people have been feeling around pressure or responsibilities or stress in any type of a way. And it could be intensified, definitely on Tuesday night. But now, again, there's going to be more of a social energy that comes into play, which is going to challenge the position of Scorpio. That's more deeper below the surface, a little more private and hidden with things going on. And we still have this sense of urgency on Tuesday night into the morning hours of Wednesday with Mercury at 29 Scorpio. But with the moon next to Pluto, well, first it makes that trine to Uranus, so it taps into Uranus and Gemini. It's kind of the social dynamic begins to increase, generally speaking, on Tuesday night and through Wednesday into Thursday. But tapped into Uranus and Gemini, again, this new era that we've kind of gotten a glimpse of since the last few months, and thinking differently, thinking outside the box. And it's just going to increase that sense of urgency for the way we're thinking or communications and information, even more so since it leads back to Mercury. But it's still emotionally, we're more comfortable with looking at things differently. It kind of also builds a little more of this revolutionary vibe for Tuesday night into Wednesday. A little more kind of the need to not do traditional emotions and feelings, like what everybody would expect. People's emotional reactions can be unique to themselves. And again, the need for freedom and kind of being a little bit different. But I would think that this is going to really activate a lot of, of the group and the community, social, political dynamics on the streets and what's going on in the streets like Portland and these other places around the United States that are really amplified with Pluto's influence. So some new developments around that. And overall transformation is in the air now as we go through Tuesday night. A sense of emotional change and transformation. There's a need to, again, emotionally detach from things that have been kind of plaguing people a little bit. Look at it in this more intellectual way. And that's the last aspect, is the conjunction to Pluto. So intensified emotions, but yet they're not, it's not like necessarily crying on the couch with a blanket. It's people's reactions of how they're projecting their emotions is different than what you would expect, but it's still amplified and intense. So I would be a little more cautious too. If you're in a social dynamic on Tuesday night, this is pretty late, the last aspect of the day. And then just be aware of the undercurrents. There's still a lot of undercurrents going on here. And we can easily pick up on what's unspoken and what's going on below the surface and people's intentions. All right, so then we get into Wednesday, October 29. The moon is past Pluto through the morning hours, and we have several aspects, but a lot of mercurial aspects for Wednesday, including the exact Mercury trine Neptune that I talked about for Tuesday. It's peaking the early morning hours right before Mercury changes signs. So for most people, when we get up on Wednesday morning, Mercury is going to be in Sagittarius. So it's a pretty big dynamic change for the mind and our perceptions and the communication style that's going to be happening. And again, now that Mercury is in Sagittarius, it's being ruled by Jupiter in Cancer in that square with Chiron. So it's no longer under the rulership of Mars. Mars is still close enough, though, that there's still a little bit of this edginess around people's communication and their mind. And it's still close enough to where there can still be some mechanical stuff, but I think there's some sort of a change here until Mercury starts to slow down, and then Mars will catch back up with it. But definitely a big change for how people are thinking and communicating. And with Mercury coming into Sag, now this isn't a place that Mercury likes to be in. Mercury's more about the facts, the details, the information, kind of bringing it down to earth in a way. But this is connected to what's above and beyond now, Sagittarius. So it's a little more challenging to like bring all these big ideas, these big thoughts, and bring them down and get into the details of it all. So it's more tapped into sometimes spiritual things, religious things. It comes back to belief. But Mercury here is also a truth seeker. It wants to get down to the truth, the bottom of things, especially because we still have Scorpio that likes to dig deep for truth and answers and research and investigation. And it's just that we're kind of shifting how we're looking at things. At least this is the background. And it also has this connection, because it's ruled by Jupiter and Cancer, it still has this connection also of your safety and your security needs, which could include this Virgo area that Mercury's ruling, where the South Node is, where there's been a lot of changes for work, where it could talk about the government employees that don't have a paycheck and how they're thinking about things. Their safety, their security is a huge influence on how they're thinking and what their decisions are going to be. And then what the news or new developments in the government, about all this kind of stuff will start to happen probably. And then again, about health for some people, how you're looking at health. It's a different way of looking at it. At the same time, with this change, Mercury's opposite Uranus too. So it's a little bit of, there can be, in some cases, excitement that's in the air. There could be some, new news or information that's exciting. In other cases, it can be disruptive. I still think that there's some issues with travel and transportation. I mean, considering that Mercury is technically debilitated and it's opposite Uranus, and Uranus is being ruled by Mercury, there could still be issues going on around technology, mechanical things, information, the news, the media could be really crazy, a little bit wild. There could be more of a rebelliousness in the air, especially the fact that the moon is still going through Aquarius. Now, with that said, let's see here. Mercury being ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is being ruled by the moon. The moon is being ruled by Saturn. Saturn's being ruled by Jupiter. Well, it's still kind of starting to, again, the need to really look at things in a different way, think outside the box, think of solutions. The moon is starting to enter the first quarter moon phase here for Wednesday, the crisis in action, how to move things forward. And with Mercury in this new position, okay, opposite Uranus, let's think about things differently. Let's try things that maybe we weren't thinking about the possibility before. Now with that, because Mercury's in its retrograde shadow, it's not totally resolved. Whatever's starting to come up here from this point forward, we're going to be revisiting and dealing with for an extended period of time. So it's not going to be instantly solved, but we're, I think, beginning to look at the bigger picture and see what's above and beyond this current moment that people are kind of wrapped up into emotionally with all this water. So even though Mercury struggles a little bit more in Sag, I think in this particular case, it can be helpful to kind of get out of the emotions a little bit more and thinking differently about it more. Now, is it logical? Maybe, maybe not. That's what we're going to have to go back and forth with the retrograde here soon. But we're entering some sort of a process that's going to be a part of all of November and most of December before we kind of move past whatever is coming up around this time from this point forward. And with the first quarter moon, again, it's the crisis in action phase. This is the one kind of thing I take away from evolutionary astrology. I don't use a lot of their techniques, but that's one thing I do use is the moon phase. Crisis in action. What's preventing us from moving forward? There's a challenge between the inner feelings of things and what we're focused on. And this square between Scorpio and Aquarius is always what I call the attachment square. Scorpio is all about holding on tight to things, what's deep, what's the past, not forgetting things. And Aquarius is more intellectual, again, about looking at things objectively, detaching by letting go of some of these deeper components. But it's a challenge because we have both. And the way people feel and what we're focused on, they're on two different pages, and they're not really, it's not a cooperating aspect. So usually there's challenges involved in the day. Now, again, not everybody will be affected by it unless you have this square in your birth chart, or if you have planets around 5, 6, 7 degrees of the fixed signs, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, or Scorpio. Then you're more likely to be wrapped up into this dynamic than other people. But this is still the background, a challenge. How do we move past it? The first quarter is not about giving up and backing down and being defeated. And that's the other issue with this Neptune and Pisces now, with Saturn here. You know, people can feel like giving up. It's too hard. You know, falling into the victimhood mentality where we need to be saved by some outside source, you know, rather than tapping into our own power and making things happen for ourselves, you know, if there is a challenge. So it's about, again, being creative with your ideas, finding solutions to overcome any obstacles. On the other hand, this is just a temporary aspect, and it's not going to be like the entire day. It's just a few hours. And so if you're fumbling with something, you don't want to give up completely, but at the same time, you know, step away from it for a couple hours, come back to it a little bit later when the moon has moved on from this exact square, which is going to be first thing in the morning on Wednesday. For other people on the East Coast, it'll be afternoon hours. And if you're in Europe, it might be late afternoon or in evening. But again, check the description and I have the exact time written for you in Arizona time, and then just do the calculation to adjust to your local time, and you'll know exactly when this aspect is taking place. And it's also an issue between politics, I believe politics and money, you know, so that's a part of the government shutdown. We might be turning a corner here with that potentially. There could be some new news or information this week about the government shutdown and money issues, you know, investment and bank issues too, around other things about money. It could be also an issue here between the group and the community, you know, friendships. There could be a little bit of a power play or some kind of intensity or a struggle with some friends in your life or the group and the community that you're around during this time on Wednesday. And that's how I'm seeing that. And then we also have Mars. Right after this first quarter moon, Mars taps into that perfect trine with Saturn. So again, that gives this a lot more opportunity to get past this struggle, because the moon is ruled by Saturn here, and the sun in Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and Mars has that trine to Saturn. So there is a solution. Even if there's a struggle, even if there's an obstacle that comes up here, there's an opening to get past it because of the rulers of those two are in a trine. But you also have to take the initiative. You have to make it happen. You have to tap into this and move forward with whatever the struggle is if you're affected by it. So Mars trine Saturn, again, it's more controlled, more disciplined, more resourceful, and more mature, generally speaking, in its actions and motivations. But remember what I also said, there is also no blocking negative action either for some people. Okay, so that's what we have for Wednesday. Let me move this forward. We get to Thursday, October 30th. The moon is halfway through Aquarius, so we continue this Aquarius moon vibe of emotions through the intellectual perspective and objectiveness and detached. Friends and group and community, strong energy there. And let's see, we have some inconjunctions, some trines, and the sextiles and a square. So a mixed bag for Thursday, October 30th. The moon starts off with the inconjunction to the south node. So we have to perhaps adjust first thing in the morning on Thursday to this work, service area, the health area, the everyday routine, practical side of life that's been going through restructuring and changing and purification, something that may have to be dealt with first thing on Thursday that could feel a little bit irritating, or again, we're just having to make some sort of adjustment first thing on Thursday. And then the moon moves into a trine with Venus. Venus is reaching 21 degrees in Libra now, and the moon makes that good trine to Venus. So these are two air signs, the moon, the feelings, the needs of things, how people nurture themselves in this phase has a good alignment to relationships temporarily. And Venus has kind of been on its own over here, separate from everything going on, trying to bring balance to all this intense energy. And it's difficult because there's just so many other influences that Venus is not in control of. Venus is the ruler of itself here, of Libra, but all these other planets are not under the rulership of Venus. So she doesn't have the control of helping, or determining if we can be, if things are balanced or not as much. But as the moon makes this trine to Venus by Thursday afternoon, it'll be Thursday evening for people on the East Coast and really late into Friday for people in Europe, there's a temporarily good connection for social energy, for relationships, one-on-one connections, friendships, and things like that. But there's all these other background vibes, so keep that in mind, that just because there's one trine going on, well, there's other trines, of course, but there's other things happening at the same time. But this is usually feeling a little more content, a little more satisfied with the mood, with relationships, with pleasure, potential, but it's air, it's up in the head, it's communicative. Let me move this away here. And, so it's more intellectual, not necessarily physical as much. But perhaps afternoon, there could be, some good connections with people or something going on. It's good for networking, good for business. The Mars trine Saturn can be good for business as well. Getting things done and those more goal type of things. So moon trine Venus, pretty good. We also have the Mercury making a sextile to Pluto. So Mercury sextile Pluto. Mercury, these ideas are going through transformation. People's minds and communications are more amplified, more powerful, more direct. Again, with Mercury here in Sagittarius and Mars right next to it, people are still going to be kind of fierce and direct with their communication. It's less of reading between the lines and a little bit less of the manipulation and kind of the emotional power struggles. That's still there on some level with all this water going on, but with Mercury and Sag, it's about opinions and beliefs that are very, very powerful, especially with the connection to Pluto in the group and the community. It's going to really show that people's communication is direct and forward. And it still has an emotional base to it because Mercury is being ruled by Jupiter in Cancer in that square. There's still sensitivities about this Mercury that's going on and safety, security issues and all that. But people's opinions are just very powerful and a lot bigger. But with the sextile to Pluto, it's tapping into groups and friends and community and networking and transformation to one's perception and kind of a power boost to the mind. And let's see, we have the moon making a sextile to Chiron. And so maybe people are starting, a little more detached around this sensitive aspect that Chiron is being activated by and feeling a little better about themselves, a little more confidence in this particular dynamic as the day goes on Thursday. And then the moon is in conjunct to Jupiter. So having to adjust between these two very different influences, Jupiter and Cancer, the emotions, the feelings, the safety, security, the home, the family, these private internal things of what people need, versus looking at it through this detached perspective, an intellectual, objective perspective, or having to adjust between the outward life, the friends, the community, your social life versus your inner life and private home and family life. A little bit of an adjustment going on there for some people, Thursday evening, Thursday night for others. And then the final aspect is the moon squaring Mars on Thursday night. So it's only going to last for the rest of the night is the influence of this, but things get a little intense with that on Thursday night with the community as well. Some emotional tension, a little bit of this impulsiveness, but again, because the moon is being ruled by Saturn and Mars is ruling itself in a trine with Saturn, I think it kind of takes away, I think it'd be worse in other situations than this one. It's still there, though. There's some emotional tension and pressure and agitation. I would avoid eating during these times. This is one thing I've been meaning to tell you guys for a while, and I always forget because I use it for my personal life. When the moon is going through difficult aspects, I try not to eat food during those exact moments. And sometimes that's an issue because when the moon is going through difficult aspects, it kind of increases this need to nurture oneself, but sometimes it just, and it doesn't mean every single time if you eat something or trying to nurture yourself in that moment, it doesn't mean it'll always have a negative result, but the odds go up that there could be an issue with the food or, something that's just not good for you, or the pressure, the tension that your body is under during that moment. It's not good to eat during those moments, So I always kind of avoid eating food, like say going out and getting something at a restaurant, especially in a case like that, because there's more likely to be something going on that you're not aware of about the food or how they handled the food, or just it could be anything, but that's just how I personally use astrology is, I would not try to eat. Now, luckily this is like super late for people, so I don't think it's relevant for most people, but go throughout the week and look at the aspects. When the moon is making a difficult aspect, try to avoid nurturing yourself in a way in that moment. Kind of wait it out a little bit. But that's just, my perspective of astrology and my experience through the years of seeing that it can have sometimes negative results and other times you won't see anything from it, but you never know. But also, I think that there's a moment here. There could be a little bit of a crisis moment, and these could be isolated events around the world. It may not just be one big event, especially with the community aspect of it late on Thursday night. And it's probably going to be, again, some of these places around the United States riled up with politics and what's going on in the streets and things like that. Okay, so that is Thursday. Let's move this to Friday on October 31st. So the overnight hours, early morning Friday, the moon is at the last critical degree of Aquarius before it changes signs. So most of us, we're going to wake up with the moon in Pisces now. And now we have 4 points in Pisces. So much Pisces still going on. But it changes the mood. It changes people's feelings and needs. And it becomes, once again, just increasing the water element that we already have. Feelings and sensitivity. With the moon in Pisces, it tends to be a lot of energetic sensitivity. Really picking up on people's feelings and emotions around you. Picking up on your environment that really affects you. It's really hard to know what you're feeling. Is it you? Is it someone else? And so things kind of move into the invisible world again, what's behind the scenes and what's more private, and people tapping into their own world. It's that darker vibe. It's Halloween. Yeah, it's Halloween here. So it kind of fits that, I would say. But right as the moon comes into Pisces, now it's being ruled by Jupiter for the next 2.5 days down here in Cancer. So it has a strong connection, again, to safety, security, comfort, home and family, emotional needs, and what's going on in these private levels of life. Also, right as the moon comes in to Pisces, it squares Uranus in Gemini. So this is really early in the morning. I don't think it's going to, it's not going to be the main influence for the entire day. So it's first thing in the morning for everybody, pretty much. If you're in Europe, it might be a little late morning, afternoon, a little bit there. But sorry, I think my phone is causing interference. 1 second. So, yeah, a little bit of an kind of this emotional mood change that just kind of abruptly comes in for this new dynamic on Friday. At first, some disruption, some excitement around the streets in the local community, the local area, neighbors, something happening in that way. And then there's 2 squares. The moon is square Uranus and the moon is square Mercury. So there's actually a T-square going on because the moon is also at odds with this Mercury. So big mutable T-square. Mutable T-squares tend to be messy at first. People are more scattered. You have to be flexible and adaptable to changing dynamics and situations. First thing on Friday morning, the heart and the mind are on 2 different pages. How people are feeling is at odds with how people are thinking. But, the moon is in Jupiter's feminine sign, Pisces, and Mercury's in Jupiter's masculine sign, Sagittarius. So the left-right brain kind of going at it a little bit, how people feel versus how they're thinking in this bigger context. But the moon here is also super intuitive, but it's clashing with how people are thinking or the news, the media, communications of what's going on. Again, it can be a lot of mental stimulation, a lot of changes. So it's messy at first, but, with the mutable squares and T-squares and stuff, now, this is more in the case of if you're born with it, because if you're born with it, your chart is something that you have years to work with and figure out more and more. But this is just temporary for the world, and we don't have the same time to figure things out. But normally, if we have a good amount of time to work with a mutable square, it starts off messy, but we tend to figure it out as time goes on by being flexible and adaptable and not too fixed and stubborn. All right, so it's kind of a turning point for, again, a lot about the mind and thinking and communications and information about things. And now we have to really tap into spiritual guidance, our alone time. It is going to be Halloween, so it's going to be a busy time, and that's probably part of the issue is there might be kind of an emotional need for some people to retreat into their own world and their private life. But there's a lot of other things going on at the same time that could, challenge that a little bit. But also when it comes to the practical side of life that's needing to go through changes of this South Node in Virgo and the North Node in Pisces. We have to look at these behind the scenes things. This is the big dynamic that we have to work with now through, well, for the next 3 months roughly, with all this Pisces going on. We have to continue to work out what causes the problems in life. What's making practical life difficult that we do behind the scenes, privately, energetically, habits, patterns, psychological things, all the hidden dynamics that we live with that affects health, that affects work, that affects our normal practical routine life that's going through changes. We tap into this a little more for the next 2.5 days as the moon is going through Pisces. And again, it's something on a bigger level that we're working out, that we've already been dealing with and trying to work out all through 2025, and that we're closing out the end of this era that's trying to be updated. It's also about how to work with spirituality in a whole new way for this next era, letting go of unhealthy things, delusional things, upgrading our faith, our belief in things. Stuff like that is going to be amplified, generally speaking. Okay, and let's see, we are on Friday. The last aspect is the moon trine the sun. So now the inner and the outer lights are in harmony with each other for Friday on Halloween. So the circumstances really tapped into what's below the surface, what's hidden, the secrets, the mysteries. Kind of fits the vibe of Halloween for sure. And there can be more of a flowing dynamic as the day into the night goes on for Friday night, but it's still watery. It's kind of behind the scenes, hidden, private, and all of that. And that's the last aspect. And then we get to Saturday, November 1. Saturday, and the moon is going to be entering these conjunctions now. Looks like the first aspect will be the moon reaching the North Node of Destiny on Saturday morning. 17 degrees. It's going to be late morning and afternoon hours for other people, evening for people in Europe. But just know I would just consider all of Saturday a destined, fateful day. It may not just be obvious. It's kind of more on this intuitive level. There's a feeling that we have a path, we have a direction that we need to go on, or we could be led to a certain direction that could have a long-term effect on the future if we make decisions in this dynamic, or whatever is happening on Saturday could be fateful, that has a bigger connection than normal to the future, things like that. And again, it's about this area that we're updating for the long-term future, how we work with Pisces, and this Pisces area trying to be cleansed too, with these eclipses that we've had here, to be upgraded to the next level and letting go of the bad habits. But they're all re-amplified now with Neptune here and Saturn here. So I would say on a more practical level, there's probably something about one of these storms going on Saturday maybe that's having a strong impact, water events, and it's water on the practical level, and then it's emotionally watery, sensitive, and fateful on these other levels. But if there is any major storms in certain places around the world, it's definitely going to have a fateful component to it that really affects the future. And we have the moon at odds with Venus. And Venus is starting to enter that T-square too. That'll be the last aspect. But at first, the moon is at odds with Venus. So that's going to be on Saturday night, really late on Saturday night. The emotions, the feelings, having to adjust to Venus, and it kind of activates the Venus in conjunct to Saturn as well. So adjusting serious things to money and relationships. It's not like the best moment necessarily for relationship activity on Saturday night. There's exceptions. There's always going to be exceptions, but Venus is entering an interesting dynamic with this T-square at the same time, and also adjusting to Saturn and the moon at the same time. So Venus opposing Chiron. What needs to heal in relationship, or any kind of one-on-one connection could go through some sort of a sensitive dynamic. At the same time, though, because Venus is building the square to Jupiter, which will be exact the following day, it's still close enough at this point right now. As Jupiter enters 25 degrees, Venus is at 24. It's 1 degree off, so it's still pretty powerful, even though it's not exact. We have to be careful of overindulgences. The moon right next to Saturn and Neptune could be this escapism tendency. Things are too heavy, or fear, worry, stress, and then that leads to people wanting a desire of something, that's a little bit challenging to feel good about or completely fulfilled, because sometimes this can be a little bit of a deprivation aspect with Moon, Saturn, at odds with Venus. So how are we feeling about pleasure, needs, desires? There's something that's trying to be worked out here on Saturday night. But be careful if you are in a relationship situation on Saturday night and the mood is off, or there's something going on. Try not to trigger something that's going to have a long-term effect as a result, and kind of like back away, kind of take it easy. This will pass within a couple days, and then, but if you trigger something that affects the future for good in this moment, then it has this longer-term consequence. But Venus opposite Chiron, again, it's self versus other, and how we're feeling about that, our own confidence about the self that affects relationship. So in some cases, it can be a wounding in relationship, and in the best case scenario, it can be a healing in relationship, but it's still a T-square. It's not balanced necessarily of what's happening. Now, luckily, the moon, as it reaches Saturn, connects to this trine with Jupiter. So we have a combination of different aspects here. We have a T-square, which is tension within love, relationship, pleasure, maybe some overindulgence, big desires that's triggering vulnerability, sensitivity. There's an inconjunction, which is kind of having to make adjustments, a little bit of irritation. And then there's trines where there's more flowing sides of life happening. So mixed bag of aspects for Saturday night. And then the moon is conjunct. Well, that'll be technically the following day. As we get to Sunday, November 2nd, the moon is conjunct Saturn and trine that Jupiter in the overnight hour. So it's kind of late Saturday into Sunday morning that this moon, Saturn, Jupiter trine is taking place. It's more, again, watery, behind the scenes, private, your own world, and that's clashing with the need for social connection or relationship connection or something like that. And let's see, we get the moon trine Mars. So the moon is kind of in this grand trine. Mars is starting to reach these critical degrees. The last degree of Scorpio. Sense of urgency is going to begin, especially when that moon reaches Aries, ruled by Mars at the last degree. But we're not quite there just yet. But moon trine Mars, it still has this connection to more controlled and more disciplined action and passion, or things that you could do and get away with on a negative level. And then the moon is reaching Neptune. So talk about sensitive, talk about imaginative and fantasy prone. And, it's all going to depend on each individual, how they work with this, because I don't like to mention it, but just the beliefs, the ideas of people in the world. There's so many crazy people in the world. There really is. And for those people, this is just going to amplify the craziness and their beliefs about crazy things. For other people, it's spiritual, it's sensitive, it's creative, it's fantasy prone, imaginative, it's retreat energy, but it's super sensitive. It can be super religious or spiritual, though, for some people. So it plays out in all these different ways. For some people, the need for music, escape into these more film, producing creative things, movies, music, movies, things like that. Now, this is super early on Sunday morning, so this isn't going to last. There's going to be a big change here. So this is like really, if you're up super early on Sunday morning, you're tapped into this more. It's more, maybe could be more drained, feeling tired too. That'll change as the day goes on. But I think if you're in Europe, this will be probably more relevant, because it'll be the middle of the day, late morning, middle of the day, something like that. And if you're in the East Coast, this will be first thing in the morning. Very different mood than later in the day that will happen. But so it has its positives, it has its negatives, but there's a lot of negatives about 29 Pisces with Neptune here. It's not everybody that has this in their birth chart, because nobody that's listening to my report has this in their birth chart. You're not. We've only just had this since the last year and a half with Neptune right here. And so this is more on the collective level, the collective unconsciousness. But it's also the weather too. The weather, the storm stuff in certain places probably. So super sensitive and compassionate, empathetic, and all that kind of stuff. All right, and then we have the moon changing signs. The moon will ingress Aries. Now we're coming into the fire, and now the moon is more in alignment in a better way with Mercury. These fire signs, more instinctive, passionate, wanting to take action. Moon in Aries tends to show people want to have a certain amount of freedom and independence for the next 2.5 days. They could be more impulsive, but there's a sense of urgency for people around action or what they're doing or this mood change, because the moon is being ruled by Mars at 29, entering 29. It's at 28.5, so it'll reach 29 as the moon is going through Aries the next 2 days. But it's still a sense of urgency for certain things, and it's going to lead to a big change in action and passion as Mars will change signs next week. It won't be in this report, but as I come back for next week's report, Mars will ingress Sagittarius. So the moon in Aries, again, it's more fiery, more direct. Things could start to speed up from this point forward a little more, coming out of this more sensitive environment. But don't get me wrong, we still have the majority of the energy is water still. So there's still a ton of emotions and feelings and sensitivity. But in this temporary mood change, things are coming out to be more fiery and open and passionate and direct. Ruled by Mars. So it still comes back to the deep end of life too. And then the moon is making aspects to all these outer planets that have changed signs. Moon sextile Uranus, moon sextile Pluto with the minor grand trine in place. And so circumstances are connecting the self to the group, the friends, the community, the local area, short trips, traveling, communications, media, just a lot more activity and stimulation in different ways as we enter Sunday afternoon, late morning Sunday afternoon. And then the moon trines Mercury. So again, the heart and the mind are now in more cooperation, the way they're feeling and thinking. This is a great time to communicate. If you need to do errands, if you need to do emails, anything mercurial, this could be one of the better times to do it on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Again, you can look at the exact time in the description for this aspect and find it for your local area. Doesn't mean everything's perfect, but, working with what we have, because we still have this other dynamic of Venus squaring Jupiter at the same time on Sunday. And that is a big aspect, relevant aspect of, and again, sometimes indulgences, going over the top with money, spending too much money, overvaluing something, Be careful of that, of your impulsiveness to buy something on Sunday. Now, if you really want it, if you feel it's, if it doesn't mean it has to be terrible in every single case, but just be more aware of what you are buying and spending on this day. And then there can be big relationship energy going on, including with family. Especially when that moon by the time the moon reaches Chiron, Venus will be kind of moving out of that. But this is also kind of the last few days. Next week will be the last of this Venus in Libra before it comes into Scorpio, squaring Pluto for the first time in Aquarius. So enjoy this Venus while it lasts, because it's not going to last. Relationships are going to really go deeper, a little more intense, a little more vulnerable, a little more difficult for a little bit later next week. But for now, Venus is still very strong. It can try to help balance things out here. It can be helpful. There's still a strong value for things. So, it may not be the exact dynamic of overvaluing something as much in this particular square, but still be a little cautious of that, and just, again, watch your impulsiveness of what you spend and buy and indulge in, and your desires could be big. There could be big money stuff going on here. So this is Sunday. It's not going to affect the market because the markets will be closed, but luckily, because things could be a little bit over the top. And that's the last aspect of this Venus square Jupiter for Sunday. Till we get to Monday, November 3. The moon is halfway through Aries, and there's not a lot of easy aspects here for Monday, November 3. The moon, there's a lot of inconjunctions mostly for most of the day. Moon in conjunct the sun, Venus in conjunct Saturn, and the moon in conjunct the south node. And the moon will reach Chiron. But there is one easy aspect, Mars, at this critical last degree, trine Neptune. So there's a sense of urgency for next week, for action and getting things done, something wanting to finalize, to close out. And with the moon in Aries, again, impulsiveness, the need for freedom and independence and taking action, things still speeding up. It just increases this emotional need for a sense of urgency to be doing something, to be taking action. And yet we have to adjust. We have to we're influenced by all these other aspects going on, including the sun's, where the sun is, this deeper side of life. What's hidden, what's private, research, investigation, control, power, intimacy, connecting to others, relationship stuff versus our independence and our freedom. So kind of having to adjust to these hidden dynamics that are influencing people. And then Venus in conjunct to Saturn, relationships are going through something this week and into next week. There's a lot of different dynamics for Venus here. So Venus having to adjust to something more serious. It's probably money. There's probably something about money here next week, for generally speaking, for some people, or in this bigger context for the markets and stuff, going through some sort of an adjustment. Government stuff here, adjusting to value and money. Again, it could be about the government workers and the government shutdown stuff, perhaps. Things like that are possible with this. But on a one-on-one level of a relationship, there's something a little more serious that's affecting your relationship. Well, not your relationships, but the background vibe, if you are wrapped up into this. And if you have a planet at 25 Pisces and a planet at 25 Libra, then yeah, you're wrapped up into this. But it could be other placements too. But generally speaking, relationships are being affected by something that feels a little more heavy and serious from behind the scenes. Or maybe we want to be engaged in some sort of pleasurable, nicer activity in some way, but there's more stress or pressure that's kind of preventing us from fully enjoying it. Things like that are possible on Monday. And then the moon is in conjunct to the south node, and we have to adjust to this area of life where you have Virgo that's going through eclipses and long-term changes of purification and restructuring and ending things. so that you can have a better, healthier life. And then work dynamics, your freedom, your independence versus work and service and health things that are getting in the way of complete freedom or something. And then the Mars trine Neptune adds, again, a kind of an intuitiveness, trusting your gut, this intuitive drive, or, it could be spiritually motivated for religious or spiritual motivations, some places around the world for people. Or again, just a dream, a fantasy that people are tapped into that's motivating them to take action in certain ways. But I would think that we can probably trust our intuition if we have this instinct, around doing something. Just always be cautious, because the moon is also reaching this square with Jupiter Chiron. And yeah, you should be a little cautious with this trine from Mars to Neptune, I guess, in this particular case, because it really, the circumstances right after that are right with Moon Chiron. And that can, again, show literal wounds and injuries, but it's also our own internal stuff, confidence, or do we have the confidence to do something? There's still this really powerful sense of urgency with Mars at 29 Scorpio. But these are ending degrees, 29 Pisces, 29 Scorpio. Things are trying to end. And there is going to be a big change in gears for people next week. For next week's report, when I talk about that Mars changing signs into Sagittarius. So these are the aspects for you guys. Appreciate you watching. And I appreciate your comments. There's a lot of nice people out there, and then there's some crazy ones, like I said. But I really appreciate the people that have supported my work. I think there's about 800, 900 of you that really support my work a lot through the years, and I really appreciate you folks. Thank you. And for everybody watching too. All right, you guys have a great week, and I'll catch you on the next one.